Hello, everybody, and welcome to Toolbox Talks on the Such Ed podcast. My name is Matt Jones, and you're joining us today for the first part of the three-part series that I'm conducting with my co-host, Edward Plant. Edward is from a company called Institute of Couples in Business. And guys, I've got to say, this series was absolutely epic. You're going to love this. So the series is called Strategic Planning Done Right. And it's all about, I suppose, helping you guys create a successful roadmap within your business. Now, I recorded this a few months back. We are pretty heavily backlogged here at the Site Shed. However, this podcast series is made up of 3 different episodes. The first one is called Beginning with the End in Mind, which is what we're listening to today. The second one is called Defining and Planning the Key Areas of Your Business. And then the third episode is called Execution Will Trump Any Plan. Now, guys, I encourage you, if you're not already, head across to the Facebook community. So that's facebook.com/groups/the Site Shed. It's a private community. Just request to join and Talia will let you in there. Edward's in that group and he's more than willing to answer questions. He does pop up every now and then when there's things that are relevant to him, but he is a guru. This series was so good, it blew me away. Anyway, this is the first episode. This is called Beginning with the End in Mind. So I'm going to ask you for 2 favors. First of all, please head across to iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast, and leave us a review, because this is seriously good stuff. And those reviews actually do help us with our rankings. We don't just ask you to do that because we think that you're bored and you have nothing to do. We ask you to do it because it helps and it allows us to keep creating these podcasts. So please go and do it. And the second thing I'm going to ask you to do is send this on to somebody that will benefit. As I said, the content that you're going to get out of this is so friggin' good. It would be a dishonor for you guys not to share this with some of your colleagues. Anyway, that's enough from me. Let's jump right in.
Giving tradies and contractors around the globe the tools to run a modern business. You're listening to Toolbox Talks from the Site Shed. Now here's your host, Matt Jones.
Hello, listeners. Welcome back to Toolbox Talks on the Site Shed podcast. My name is Matt Jones, and you're joining us today for part 1 of the Strategic Planning Done Right series I'm conducting with my colleague and co-host, Edward Plant. Edward, welcome.
Hi, Matt. How you doing?
Very well, Ed. This has been a long time coming, this podcast. I think we were connected probably a couple of years ago, and I don't know what happened. We seem to have drifted apart, but we're back in each other's embrace now.
Back at the right time, stronger and better.
So, Ed, you're from the Institute for Couples in Business, is that right?
That's absolutely correct.
And do you want to give us a bit of a rundown as to, you've got a very interesting past, and I'm sure the audience would like to hear a little bit about that before we dive in.
Yeah, so I started my life after school in the Australian Army and ended up spending, I call it a short time there, but it ended up being 17 years, where I was an engineer. So I had was in the Corps of Engineers and travelled around the world with soldiers. So I went to Iraq, Papua New Guinea, Asia, deployed with a heap of guys at different stages and pretty much had to lead guys through those different environments. And then my roles back in Australia were around training officers to lead guys as well. So at the lieutenant, captain and major level, training officers to plan operations and lead their troops through those successful missions.
Yeah, wow. Okay. 17 years.
Yeah, so when I got out, I'd been in the Army half my life.
Jesus.
So I joined at about 17 and a half and I left at 35.
Okay. So we've got a lot of listeners actually that are former military, especially a lot of the overseas guys. So I'm sure they'll probably get a lot out of this. So now the Institute of Couples in Business, let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so when one of the reasons I got out of the Army was I realised that my values were no longer aligned and I was always doing things that somebody told me to do and I'd do them really well, but I'd never really had control of my destiny in what I wanted to do. So I'd spent 17 years doing everybody else's stuff and doing it really well, and I wanted to regain control of what I wanted to do and have a bigger impact on my life. So that meant getting out, and I started working with businesses in strategic planning. Most of them just got in and did things, and there was no plan to get them towards the end game. That evolved into my wife joining me in the business, and we started working with couples probably 9 years ago. and helping them really get their business working better. And 12 months ago, we launched the Institute for Couples in Business, which is now we do research into couples, and it's a demographic that's got no voice. So we're providing a voice for them.
Yeah.
And the research from the Australian Bureau of Statistics shows that 30% of businesses that started in 2011 were couples in business.
Yeah,
so
interesting.
there's a huge demographic there. So we provide that advocacy, but also provide the support for them to get it right, make life easier, double their revenue, and have a better life.
Look, it's certainly a relevant topic when we're talking about trades, because there's a lot of operators out there that are husband-wife operators, father-son operators, all that kind of stuff. So it was part of the reason why I was pretty excited to get you on the show to talk about this. I know back actually, as we just discussed off air, back in, when was this? Oh, geez. It was this time actually in 2016. It was June 2016. I had the infamous Mr. Al Levy on the show, and we were talking about why most family businesses don't work. And in that episode, in that series, we were talking a little bit about org chart, defining roles, and leadership and all that kind of stuff. So I think this will be a very complementary series in relation to what we discussed back then. And we've broken this down as well. So we've called it Strategic Planning Done Right, the series, but it's going to have a very big family spin on it, which I think is very important. So in the first episode, we're going to talk about beginning with the end in mind. In the second episode, we're going to be talking about defining and planning the key areas of your business. And then in the final episode, we're going to be talking a little bit about execution and how execution will effectively trump any plan that you've developed. So in your experience, Ed, are those three topics that you see as sort of a fundamental starting point for businesses and for couples going into business together?
Yeah, I think we sit down with hundreds of business owners every year, and all of them will say that they've got good planning, and 80% of them have no idea about planning.
Yeah.
Like they come up with a bit of a plan, and then it doesn't really work. There isn't enough depth to it, and it goes off the rails really quickly. Another opportunity comes in, they jump on that, they get distracted, whatever happens. And so it's a combination of not planning from the start right and not implementing it well. And so they're the 3 points we're going to cover.
And I suppose, obviously after spending 17 years in the military, that's a lot of planning, right? They're pretty methodical about setting plans, setting goals, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm assuming that you've taken a lot of what you've learned out of that arena and applied it to traditional business. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think the military, for any other military listeners out there, I apologise for what I'm about to say, but I think the military are amazing at planning.
Yeah.
But they're awful at planning as well.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And so what happens with the military is it's a huge beast and it's very complicated, and it's a bit of a soapbox that I could get on.
Yeah.
But if we look at Iraq, Afghanistan, conflicts throughout the world, there's everybody they go into it with the planning of their end in mind, not the actual end in mind.
Yeah.
And so if we look at Iraq, the end in mind for most people was to hand it over to Iraqi control and get out of there.
Right.
What that means is that as soon as they get out of there, it
pandemonium.
It collapses again, and they need to lift it themselves instead of the goal really being long-term sustainable handover. But of course, that costs huge amount of money, government involvement, and troops on the ground for a long time.
Right.
And so while their mechanisms for planning are amazing, sometimes their outcomes are completely misaligned. And it's also a little bit of it's the Anglo-Saxon, British, US, Australian, let's bring the way that works for us into an Iraqi or a Muslim country or whatever it is.
Right.
And they're just completely different ways of doing life.
Yeah, interesting.
Which don't get factored in a lot. We've got better at it over the last 10, 15 years. But as you look at those hotspots around the world, they're still pretty hot.
So diving into part one, we're going to be talking about beginning with the end in mind. This is all something I suppose that we hear from time to time that may sound very cliche, you got to keep your eye on the finish line, all this kind of stuff. But effectively, it's pretty accurate. I'm interested to sort of dive into this one and get your take on it. So, what effectively are we talking about here, beginning with the end in mind?
Yeah, totally. And so just before we get into it, let me flag that while we work with couples in business, everything we'll talk about today are the foundational level stuff that you can use on sole businesses or whatever business you're running.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of complexities with couples, but the base foundations that we'll go through are for those. So starting with the end in mind, Stephen Covey got it right in his best-selling book, and everybody will know that, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and start with the end of the mind. And it is as simple as knowing what's the end game for you. And this is different for a lot of people. It could be where you want to be in retirement at the age of 70 or whatever it is, or it could be how you're going to sell the business.
Yeah.
It could be as much at this stage as going to, I want a business that generates this much money and gives me this much free time.
Yeah, it's one of the, and I said before, it's a little bit cliche because you hear it a lot, but I challenge the fact that most people probably don't implement what they hear by any measure. Over the years, especially when you're starting out in business, like the biggest goal is like, well, I just want to make enough money so that I can pay my freaking mortgage or rent or whatever it is. And then all this vision about, being able to sell the business and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, great. That sounds all like unicorns and rainbows, but like at the moment, let me just freaking make enough money to pay the bills kind of thing.
Absolutely. And it's the difference between the end result and the next result.
Right.
And I think in the process, we really need to be clear on the end result and the next result. And how much you put into the end result planning depends on what stage of next you're at.
So when you're talking about beginning with the end in mind, like, is that at that point, it's probably not so much a strategic position that you'll want to put yourself in, is it? It's more like, well, this is ideally where I'd like to be. I want to sell my business in 10 years. I want to, be making $100,000 a month in 10 years. Like, it's not really, it's sort of like a dream, right? And then we need to strategize on how to get to that point. Is that the idea?
Yeah, I sort of call it like a pinpoint on a map.
Right.
So let's say we're sitting in Sydney, Australia, and we go, the end point is Rome in Italy.
Yeah.
So we put the marker on Rome in Italy, but right now we need to work out how we're going to get out of Sydney. And that journey is, okay, we're going to walk from the house to the harbour, we're going to jump on a boat, and we're going to sail to Asia.
Yeah.
And we'll work out, and then we do that planning to get to Asia in detail.
Yeah.
And so it's that, depending on the level that you're at. So if you haven't done a lot of planning before, just put the mark on the map of where you want to be, and then we need to focus down in the shorter term and do a lot more detail on that to get you out of that survival, struggle, doing it all on your own, making ends meet approach.
Yeah, okay. And I know we're going to dive into like team building and that kind of stuff in the following episode, so we won't recap too much on that. But we've been putting a lot of emphasis, stress, resource, content into lately, and I'm guessing this will tie into either in this episode or perhaps the following episode, around, creating systems in the business, but breaking it down into areas like your departments within your organization, the roles that make up that department, the responsibilities that make up the role, like, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm curious to see, like, when we're talking about beginning with the end in mind, does that play a part at that early in the piece, or is that sort of more, okay, after we've got that beginning with the end in mind, sort of where we want to be, then we sort of go back and frame all that other stuff up?
I would say it's a time thing.
Right.
So I would go, if it's over 10 years away, the exit time, you don't need to spend a lot of time on that because things are going to change so much.
Well, and that's a good point, actually. Like, you raise a good point there. What is, an ideal time frame? I mean, you've got a 20-year-old kid that's starting his plumbing business. Like, he's probably not going to be sitting there thinking, well, by the time I'm 30, I want to be retired. Like, but how do you go about setting a realistic, well, actually, maybe not realistic. Like, how do you go about setting an unrealistic goal? Because if you set a realistic goal, you just end up on the treadmill,
Treadmill of making it happen.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. And for some elements, those may not be time driven. Like, it may be dangerous to put a time thing on it.
Right.
Because it starts to put that pressure on it and you go, wow, how am I going to do that?
Yeah.
But for the 20-year-old or the 25-year-old or the 30-year-old even, it could just be enough that I want to have 5 trucks on the road, turning over this much, generating this much profit, giving me this free space to look at the next options.
Okay.
Or to be in a position where one of the bigger construction companies are going to buy me out.
Yeah.
And do that. And so once we've got that, that's like it's just like a marker that we're driving towards. And then we want to break down and make it a lot more real and tangible. And I think 3 years is a really good next step.
Okay.
3 years is that time frame that just allows you to. 5 years is a bit too far, and a lot happens. But 3 years, and we go 3 years and then 12 months in detail. And 3 years is enough. If you go 12 months, then there's 2 years left to that 3 year mark, and you can really get your head into that, and it's not too far for people to go, wow, there are so many complexities that spin me out of control.
That's interesting, isn't it? 3 years. I would have thought it would have been longer, but it does make sense. I mean, I know even with setting goals and strategy and, doing things within the business, I've been, through that many business courses and had that many inverted comma experts, or mentors, should you say, and they're always like, right, well, let's set a 10-year goal, and, you look at it and you go, yeah, great, 10-year goal, but then, in order to get there, you really need to break it down into bite-sized chunks. So I feel like the 3 year time frame is far more visual than a 10-year.
And what happens for a lot of businesses we work with, like 80% of them, is they achieve their 3 year goals in 18 months.
Right.
So imagine if you planned in detail 10 years, but you suddenly hit them you hit all of that in 5 years.
Right.
You've just done a huge amount of work that didn't need to happen.
Right.
Because it's all faster and you all got there quicker. So the time changes any plan.
Yeah, gotcha.
So by 3 years it gives you the flexibility, the direction, and the ability to adapt when things happen. And I know business is complicated and it changes so quickly. Like your business today will be different to what it was 6 months ago. Never mind 3 months ago.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the pitfalls that people tend to fall into when you look at a business, and the ones that tend not to be adaptable and tend not to want to evolve are normally the ones that typically get screwed over in the end, or they go under, or whatever it is. But like having that ability to, I suppose, adapt and change to things that are happening within the industry, within the market, all that kind of stuff. That's really important from a business owner. So I'm just curious how, when you're beginning with the end in mind, you're basically talking about an end goal that, well, maybe the end goal doesn't change, but the journey to get there certainly will.
Yeah, certainly. The other aspect, and you're big in the digital world where technology is so huge.
Right.
We can't even contemplate the technology that's going to be there for business in 10 years' time.
Yeah, that's right.
Like it's mind-blowing what could happen. If we look at 10 years ago, podcasts weren't even on the radar,
right.
And all these things.
Yeah.
So when we were in the Army, one of the basic things that I learned was we did operational planning from multi-thousands of people down, all the way down to platoons, which was a 30-man team. And at the platoon level, they had a one-page map that showed them everything they needed to do for their mission. So it had the resources they allocated, the timelines they had to adhere to, the timelines on a map of where they went to be, what resources they'd have, the different team members that they'd get given for certain missions, when they had them, what they could do with them. They'd have essential tasks that absolutely had to be achieved. They'd have implied tasks of what would be good to achieve, and they'd have mission essential tasks, which were the priority for the mission. And that was all on one page, and anybody in that platoon could pick up that plan and understand what needed to be happened.
Yeah, right.
And the reason for this was that if the boss got killed, the next person needed to step up and do it.
Yeah. And so with that one page map, Ed, would that include like the leadership structure?
Yes. So chain of command.
Absolutely.
Okay. And roles and responsibilities for all the main groups.
It's a freaking big page.
Well, it's not. It was an A3 piece of paper.
Yeah,
but
right.
It was the language that the military makes it is that everybody's clear on the organisation and the roles that they're in, who's in command, and what happens because we've trained it, we've lived it, and we've done it all. So it was a map in the middle, and then the left-hand side and the bottom had all the information and detail for the taskings, missions, breakdown.
Yeah, well.
And so what I think businesses need is that one page. Like, we don't need a 28-page document that we never use.
Yeah.
We need something that we can pick up and run with on a regular basis.
Yeah.
We call this our business street plan.
We interrupt this podcast today to talk to you very quickly about Tradie Web Guy's content creation program. That program has been designed specifically for trade-based organizations as a way that you guys, as trade business owners, can start creating content that enables you to engage better with your customers and your potential customers. It will enable you to build trust and build rapport, because what you're doing is you're investing in educating them. The biggest problem that we see with our customers today is that they're not regularly updating their websites. And that's a problem because, first of all, the search engines are looking for that. And second of all, potential customers are also looking for it. Tradie Web Guy's content creation program has been specifically designed to help you get regular, relevant content on your website consistently every month. We know that it's hard when you're out there on the tools, and we know that sometimes you don't always have the time to be able to do these things yourself. So we're taking it off your hands for you. It's a service that we're offering for you guys. We want to make sure that you're getting this done because we know how important it is. Anyway, head across to tradiewebguys.com.au/content, fill in the form, and one of our representatives will come back to you. And so when we're talking about beginning with the end in mind, and we've got a bit of a family spin on this, and so, you know, in scenarios where, say you're in a business with your partner, or perhaps you're in a scenario where you have been working with, I don't know, say your dad who's the builder, and you'd want to take the business over at some point, that beginning with the end in mind really needs to basically involve both of you, right?
Yeah, and I think you've hit on one of the core problems, and we call it getting on the same page.
Yeah.
Whether it's dad, son, dad, daughter, mum, daughter, or husband, wife, or couple, if they're not on the same page, it's just going to cause friction.
Of course.
Like, if the dad's got a different agenda of what he wants out of the business and what he wants to get out compared to the son, it's going to cause problems.
But I can't imagine that there would be a single father-son business on the planet that they would have the same goals. Like, the dad would be like, well, I want to play golf and sit on the boat, and the son's like, I want to build an empire. Like, it's chalk and cheese.
Well, yes. However, quite often the son's goal is to get the dad playing golf and sitting on the beach.
Exactly.
Because I want you out of the business as quick as possible. Because I want to do it my way.
Funny segue, side story here, but one of my good friends, who definitely won't listen to this podcast, although he will say he will. He had a very successful window tinting business, which was he basically went in there and worked with his dad. And his dad was like, we want to get a consultant in here. We want to see where the bottlenecks in the business are. And Tim was like, no, mate, we don't need to do that. It's a waste of money. It's just going to be an expense we don't need. His dad's like, no, we need to do it. We're going to do it. And Tim's like, Dad, I don't want to do this. And he goes, I'm doing it. So he gets this consultant in. And anyway, the consultant turns around at the end of they look through all the business, and he basically says to Tim, who's the general manager, he goes, mate, the bottleneck in the business is your dad. You got to get rid of him. And so he basically had to force his dad into early retirement, which was hilarious. But there you go.
Oh, and it's so true. Like, yeah, the stories are out of control. There's a family business that had 15 stores, and the dad was still going down to every store on a weekly basis and meddling in how they were delivering their product.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure.
Like, get out of it.
Yeah. Oh, man. It must be hard, though, as well for the dad, right? Because his dad's like, well, this is my baby. I've built it from the ground up. Like, you know, I want to make sure everyone's not, you know, doing things my way, which, as you and I know, may not be the right way. But
And they come from a generation where they probably were alive when a world war was on. They've gone through those hard times, and they've built their business by getting in and doing it.
Right.
Really hands-on, and they've grown it that way, and that's how they know how to do life.
Right.
It's tough to say to them, stop doing it that way.
It's interesting. I mean, I've spoken about this before on the show, but I mean, I know even in my experience when I was going through my apprenticeship and things like that, you know, you grow up, or you spend your time learning in your apprenticeship, the way that the company that you work for, the way they operate. So it's, oh, okay, well, this is how we invoice. Oh, okay, well, this is how this is done. This is how this is done. This is how this. But you don't really get any exposure to the better ways of doing things. And, especially when we talk, I mean, mind you, this is going back a lot of years, but, technology and things like that, how the role that technology can play in replacing certain areas of a business and all that kind of stuff. And then from the business owner's perspective, they'd be like, well, why would I change it? This works fine. We've been doing this for ages. But what they don't understand is there's so many better ways to be doing things.
Oh, totally. Last year I was doing I did a gig, some work with a company. And I rang up before the first day and I said, hey, dude, the payment hasn't come through for the first bit. And they said, yeah, that's because we pay in checks and I'll bring the check to you on Friday when we catch up. And I was like, what?
Oh, God.
Every Thursday, the director still wrote checks out to pay everybody wages, and they went to the bank that afternoon to bank them.
Jesus. That's insane.
And this wasn't 10 years ago. This was 18 months ago.
I didn't even know you could get checks anymore. I've never had a checkbook in my business. That's insane. Anyway, all right. So I think we've digressed a little bit there, but getting back to it. So beginning with the end in mind, let's talk about, first of all, I suppose. I mean, we've spoken about understanding where we want to be, which is kind of at that stage more of a hope, a dream, a wish than a reality. So I guess in the next episode, we're going to dive into how to define and break down the bite-sized chunks, which can help us get to that goal. Is that right?
Yeah. So let's very simply, for anyone listening, do a simple exercise of get a sheet of A4 paper, draw a big cross in it so that you break it up into quadrants. And in the top left-hand corner, let's call this 3 years, and we'll call it vision. And in that 3 years, you just want to paint a picture of what you want that 3 years to look like. Do you want to own your own premises? How many trucks on the road? How many team? Turnover? Type of clients? Lifestyle? Family? Own your own house? Whatever that looks like. Go visual, go big, and make it, and do that in the top left-hand corner. In the top right-hand corner, let's just call this goal and make this 12 months. And this is the start of our business street plan. And in that goals, just make them realistic and achievable and measurable. Mm-hmm. So looking at monthly target, monthly turnover, leads you need, systems you need in place, marketing you need to do, team development, recruitment, and the list goes on, whatever you need for that to achieve that 12-month goal. And then the next part, which we'll come to later, is the bottom left-hand, and we call that projects. And we want to get clear on what you need to work on in every 3-month basis.
Okay.
So that's projects down there. And then the bottom right-hand corner is we reserve for weekly actions. And in those weekly actions, we need to do 3 things every week that go towards achieving the projects.
Okay. So effectively, you can have this drawn up on like say a whiteboard or something, and the top 2 will stay the same for a year. The bottom left will stay the same for 3 months, and then every week you'll change the bottom right quadrant.
And I use Post-it notes, so I just stick over the Post-it notes in the bottom right-hand corner with my 3 for the week.
Okay.
And then
leave the others up there.
Leave the others up there, yeah, so I can see where I'm. What this allows us to do is drive towards the big picture while still getting stuff done in the day-to-day.
Gotcha.
And what happens in every business is they get stuck in the day-to-day, and that consumes them, and they spin without really looking to make sure it's getting them towards the big picture.
I love that framework. That's brilliant.
And so that does that. And what happens as well with the Post-it note is you look at it and you go on Wednesday and go, oh, I haven't done a thing. I need to pull my finger out and do those 3 things.
Mm.
And then on Friday you can check in and go, yes, I did them.
And
if you do that, if you do 3 things every week towards your 3 major projects that are going to help you achieve your number 1 goal, in 3 months you'll have killed those projects.
Yeah.
You'll have nailed them. And then if you do that 4 times a year, you'll hit your 12-month project. And most of our clients hit it in about the 8-month time frame.
Yeah, interesting. Oh, man, I'll tell you, there's so much power in breaking like those goals and accountability down into weekly chunks, and even
we just want to chunk it down.
Yeah, totally. Like it just, I mean, I know, at one point I was doing like an accountability program with a friend of mine, and man, we were just killing it. And then he went out of kids, selfish prick. But like before that, like we were just, everything we were doing was just like bang, 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 ticking things off the list. We had it all like drawn up in this beautiful little project management thing. And then all of a sudden that all fell apart. But it just goes to show that, that sort of, breaking it down into little actionable things. We had, we had like ways that with our project management tool, we could tie the goal into the monthly, into the week, into the quarterly. Like it was so cool. I should go back to that actually. I totally forgot about it, but
totally. Really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what I think is important is just having that one page, what it allows you to do is be really clear on where you're going and get you out of the cycle that you can get yourself in of just doing stuff because you've always done that. And the importance of this is, and it was from the military, when we used to call it, once the mission starts, you cross the line of departure, rounds can start going down range. And as soon as rounds go down range, things change. Shit happens and things can get crazy. But your plan needs to be able to deal with all those contingencies.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody needs to keep moving towards the big mission. So that once you cross the line of departure, whatever happens, everybody's still on track and stays on track. And business is like that.
Okay.
When you'll get problems. There's no way that you can say your plan and everything will go perfect. You're living in a bubble if that's the case. So by having this framework, it allows you to see the big picture and adjust when problems come in according to what's going to get you to the result.
Stupid question, but maybe not. In like a lot of the guys out there have interests in, maybe multiple businesses or maybe like significantly different areas of a business, like, we're plumbers, electricians and HVAC, or we're plumbing, but we're looking to acquire a building company or something like that. Would you apply that framework to the organization as a whole, or would you apply it to the...
So once again, drawing on my army experience, everything was nested, if I can use that word. So if you imagine when we were in Iraq, we had the Iraq objectives for handing over to Iraqi control. And then every province would have their missions. And then inside every province, there were battalions and brigades that had their missions. But if you imagine the platoon achieved their mission, which allowed the company to achieve their mission, which allowed the battalion to achieve their mission, the brigade, the province, the country. So they were all nested that aligned and helped each other. That's what I'd recommend. Have one for the company overall, and then in each of those departments, have one for those areas.
Gotcha.
The reality for most business owners, depending on their level of experience, though, or their level of time in the business, is if they have too many parts too early, they'll do all of them poorly and not get the traction they want.
Right. Yeah, I just know that's a reality. Oh, I mean, even if you look at, say you run two businesses. Well, I run two businesses effectively as well. So I'm just wondering, like when you're looking at that framework, how you would apply that. And it sounds like you would. I mean, for me, the two businesses are significantly different. So it would mean probably having like the overall, and then having the two individuals that make up the overall.
Yeah, so we have two businesses. One of them's the business networking organisation.
Yeah.
And I use our business street plans in a bit more detail. We've got a few more detailed processes, but this is a really good tool, the street plan, to start off with in your planning. So I have one for the Business League and I have one for the Institute for Couples in Business.
Mm-hmm.
But my key consideration is really around time and how much of my time I put into each. And I'm really strict on the time I put into the Business League.
Yeah, okay. I'm with you. Good. All right. Well, I'm pretty stoked with that. Is there anything you wanted to add before we wrap this one up and hop into the next one?
Not really. I think planning can be scary and people can say, I don't want that much control and that much direction, but it really allows you the freedom to go and do more of what you love doing and just take it simply. A lot of people bite off too much and try and achieve too much. So really in the first 3 months of your new planning cycle, just take small chunks and get momentum for you instead of overwhelming yourself from the start.
Well, I'd like to throw a challenge out there to all the listeners. For you guys that are, a lot of you that are in the Facebook community, I want you to go and draw out that quadrant for me. So the 3-year vision in the top left corner of the quadrant, in the top right quadrant, the 12-month goal, the bottom quadrant. In the bottom left quadrant, you can do the projects for 3 months and then do the weekly action for the week leading up to that 3-month period for the week that you're currently in. And then take a photo and post it in the Facebook community, and the winner will get something really awesome, which I haven't decided yet. Maybe one of Edward's books. What do you reckon, Ed?
Yeah, totally. Lead the ship. We can give you a book. Yeah,
fantastic. Totally. All right, fantastic. Well, ooh, that's actually very good. And by the way, guys, Ed is in the community, so by all means, I'll make a bit of a kick and fuss about that, and we can run a bit of a fun contest or something like that.
Yeah, awesome. And if you want us to chuck up a copy of the street plan into the community, we can check that in your files section.
The one we just spoke of, that quadrant.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, well, let's do that. And then, well, maybe we can give the guys like a framework to download, and then they can populate it. And all right, it's cool. All right, awesome. So for the listeners out there, Ed, where can they get hold of you? What's the best place? I'll put links to this in the show notes, obviously.
So instituteforcouplesandbusiness.com is our website. We're on Facebook, Edward and Rebecca Plant. We also have a Couples in Business closed group. So if you're a couple in business, jump on over to that and just look for Couples in Business on Facebook.
Okay, cool. I'll put some links, guys, for to those what I just spoke about then in the show notes. So fear not, you'll be able to get hold of that if you head across to the webpage. I'll send you there. All right. Well, let's wrap this one up, Ed, and we'll come back with the following episode, which is going to be defining and planning the key areas of your business. In that episode, we're going to give a bit more granular detail into, I suppose, the roadmap to help us get to these goals. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll specifically spend time on getting the 12-month goals right and the projects or pillars right to make sure you nail it.
Okay, rad. All right, well, let's wrap this up. Thanks for your time, mate. And we will come back with the following episode for the listeners in a following week.
Fantastic. Awesome chatting, Matt.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Toolbox Talks. If you're liking what you hear, then you can head across to the siteshed.com where you can join our community by signing up to our Toolbox Talks. You'll get sent a weekly notification, which is basically a highlight of everything that we've spoken about during that week, along with any other industry news that may be relevant or specific to the trades. If you're enjoying the show, you can head across to iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, where you can leave us a review. That would be fantastic, and all the reviews get read out in the show. Likewise, if you have any friends or colleagues that you think would benefit from the show and the episodes that we create, then please go ahead and share it with them.